Welcome back to Church and State with Chris Farrar and Brian McCall, where we discuss two stories on the secular side, what's going on in the state and in the Catholic Church. So today we're going to start on the state side, and as our viewers probably remember, a major Supreme Court case came down in 2022, Dobbs v. Jackson's Women's Health, which overturned Roe v. Wade. It didn't end abortion per se, but it put the question back into the hands of state legislatures. And many of those states have adopted a variety of laws restricting or prohibiting abortion, which has enraged Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby. And they kind of use, lots of stories, very sad stories and cases to, talk about how horrible, what an evil country this is where you can't just kill your children in the womb. So there's a story that came out within the past week that I think is, first of all, a sad comment on what abortion does to the sensibilities of people in our country, sort of just their whole lack of respect for life, but is being used by the liberal media to attack Kentucky, a state where abortion laws have been the hot topic in elections and brought a lot of fighting in the state among the governor and other legislators. So a lady, Lakin Schelling, who's a 21-year-old university student, has been arrested this week because the police found in her home a newborn baby in a plastic bag in her closet. Now, the autopsies are apparently inconclusive. The baby suffocated, it appears, but they can't tell whether the baby just suffocated in the womb or in birth and was stillborn, or whether she suffocated by being just placed in a plastic bag. And was left there after she died. But in any event, at this point, the police have charged her. She's had a bail hearing on at least concealing a birth and abusing a corpse, which is kind of interesting since I think abortion clinics for years have been abusing corpses when they are finished with their abortion. But the liberal media is going crazy saying this poor girl, look what girls have to do now because they're so afraid of abortion laws that they go to these extremes. So obviously a sad case for this little baby, but what do you make of this case? What's it say about the state of the abortion debate here?
Well, once you've legalized the murder of children in the womb, what's the difference postpartum? Nothing really. Oh, I didn't get to the abortionist in time, so I'll stow the baby in the closet. I don't know. What is the position of the defense attorneys? The defense attorney claiming that
she's she pled not guilty. That's it.
I don't know. Was it a stillbirth? We don't know. So how much can we say about the case based on what we know, which is very little? But the idea that a child born alive who survives an abortion can be left in a closet to die is commonplace now in places like Illinois. Remember Barack Obama, when he was a state legislator, proposed a bill that would have required care for children who survived abortions instead of being left to die somewhere in a dark room or in a closet or wherever. So the concept of child murder in the womb readily transfers to child murder immediately postpartum. What's the difference, really? Remember the Carhart case?
Mm-hmm.
Where the Supreme Court barely upheld the Born Alive Protection Act. And the analysis is absolutely repulsive and grisly. They upheld the act because it established clear anatomical landmarks for when the abortion was prohibited. If a certain percentage of the baby comes out of the womb, which was readily determined, I think it was the belly button or the forehead or some anatomical landmark, that provided a sufficient standard to survive rational basis review. So you have Supreme Court justices actually discussing seriously how you can murder children as long as they haven't entirely left the womb or have not reached the anatomical landmark. So what was this woman doing? She was just apparently, if this was a case of child killing after birth, was simply carrying out the logic of abortion.
Well, and again, another possibility. I mean, maybe and they haven't really said how old the baby was. They're obviously fairly full term, but it could be an attempted botched abortion. And one of the reasons those have become so dangerous, thanks to Sleepy Joe's probably auto pen, is the Biden administration made it possible for these chemicals that can cause an abortion to literally just be ordered without a prescription, without a doctor, through the mail. You just take them at home, have your abortion, deal with your dead child as you will. Again, in an attempt, overtly, he said, to undermine the Supreme Court's ruling and get abortion out there. This pill is just, I mean, it's extraordinary that you could, take something you can hardly take you can't get an antibiotic without a doctor's prescription. You got to go see your doctor. They want to follow up with you, but you can take something that's powerful enough to cause you to go into labor, kill your child now because the FDA thinks that that's safe. I know Robert F. Kennedy committed when he was appointed that he was going to look into this and see how safe this was. Still no answer on that yet. But what are your predictions on that?
I don't know what he'll do, but I know that mifepristone can produce massive hemorrhaging. In a significant number of cases, women who take this pill end up in the emergency room because they think they're bleeding out. It's a horrific so-called medication, which has fatal effects. What it really does is it prevents progesterone receptors from supplying progesterone to the child, and the child just starves to death in the womb for lack of nourishment. So what this drug does is basically kill the baby in the womb, or almost kill the baby, and then you take the second pill in the regimen, which expels the fetus, dead or alive, by the way, or almost dead, and expels it from the uterus. So there is actually a pro-life protocol designed to reverse the effects of mifepristone called abortion pill reversal. You just administer supplemental progesterone to restore the progesterone connection in the womb to save the life of the child. But it's absolutely horrific. But it just shows another example of the abortion distortion. Everything was to yield to the sacred right of abortion in this death cult of a society that we now have. The culture of death, as John Paul II called it. Too little, too late, by the way, with his pessimistic assessment of the modern world.
The modern world that the Second Vatican Council embraced because it's just so great. We need to get hip with the modern world. But
I've been writing this up. I'm coming out with the second volume of this Liberty book, and you notice that when John Paul II goes to Fatima, he's suddenly very pessimistic. He talks about apocalyptic developments. He talks about souls being lost to hell for lack of anyone to pray for them. But then when he goes back to Rome, he's talking about the modern world and the wonderful progress that man has made and interreligious dialogue and all the rest of it. But then finally, at the end of his pontificate around 2003, he's talking about silent apostasy throughout former Christendom. So this is what we're experiencing. It's the final stages of what he called the culture of death and the reflection of silent apostasy. People live, as he said in one of his final addresses back in 2003, Ecclesia in Europa, as if God no longer exists. They just live for this world. And they're all miserable. People are miserable. Half the country is on some sort of antidepressant medication. It's the therapeutic culture that Philip Reef talked about in his book. And he did that from a secular perspective. So all of this is of a piece. Abortion is basically the sacrament of this diabolical culture of death. And it must be protected at all costs, which is why abortion pills are exempted.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I was thinking this week and reading just really these crazed people and sort of their obsession with abortion. And it reminded me, if you think back to the 1980s and 90s, and you and I were around, maybe a lot of our viewers weren't, but we were around. I mean, you had politicians that were bad, that were in favor of abortion, and they were still horrible. But essentially would admit, like, abortion's a bad thing. We don't really like them. But we don't want the government interfering. Like they made false arguments that were sophistic, but they weren't like in love with abortion. They were like at least willing to admit like it's a sad thing, it's a tragedy. And there's been a real change, I think, among frankly the mainstream of the Democratic Party have turned it into rather what they would say like a technical argument about the role of the government and how far they can be to stop a bad thing, into, like I said, treating it like a holy grail, like a sacrament that like more abortions, the better. And why do you think that change, that qualitative change to just sort of embracing abortion as opposed to allowing it or permitting it has come about?
Well, it's the Democrat Party is an abyss of nihilism and apostasy. That's all there is to it. They've completely lost sight of the divine. They've completely lost sight of man's eternal destiny. They don't care about the four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. They laugh at that. They live for this world and this world only. I remember a Jesuit professor saying that if there were no eternal life, no God to judge evil and bestow grace and impose eternal punishments, this Jesuit said, I would just do anything I want. What would be the point? Because there would be no such thing as a human nature. We'd just be collections of molecules, there being no creator. We arose somehow through chance operations of material things, and there's no eternal destiny. And so, whatever, do what you please. Things happen, and live life as you please, because that's all there is anyway. So ultimately, and this is what we read about in the Brothers Karamazov, if there is no eternity, then everything dries up. There is no love in the world anymore, because there's nothing to look forward to. There's just this. And if something interferes with this, meaning an unwanted child, put it in the closet. And, in a few days it'll be dead, and you can go on with your life. And then maybe you'll find a way to hide the body. It seems to be that that's what happened in that case. I don't think it was a stillbirth, because why would there be why would she hide it in the closet? It must have been alive when born.
Yeah.
So this is what we're talking about: a complete loss of the eternal perspective, nihilism, apostasy, and then the result is a death cult. The Democrat Party today is a death cult.
So was that Jesuit you spoke about possibly Father James Martin? Because I guess he doesn't believe in any eternal punishment anymore, since he doesn't think we have any human nature. And
the Jesuit, he was a very solid Jesuit who would obviously reject that conclusion.
Yeah.
But he said, if it were the case, what would be the rationale for not doing whatever you pleased, including killing your child or allowing it to be born and sticking it in a plastic bag in your bedroom closet? What's the point of worrying about morality? There is no morality. If there is no God, there is no eternal destiny. There is no human nature. There is no anything except survival and pleasure and doing what you please while you can still do it. So this is what we see in the Democrat Party. And some of them actually have the audacity to speak of God. So you have somebody like Nancy Pelosi, one of the doyens of the death cult, prominently displaying her ashes on Ash Wednesday. Total mockery of the faith. She doesn't believe in the first thing of the moral teachings of the Catholic Church, and she's parading around with ashes on her forehead. This is America. Yeah. I forget who said it. This is a place where religion is 2,000 miles wide and 1 inch deep.
That's great. Well, speaking of that, let's turn over to the Vatican, because there was a really horrible sight this past week. This is as people know, the pilgrimage year. It's a holy year, jubilee year. A lot of groups going to Rome. Well, one group called the LGBTQ Catholics, who got a mention in the official program of the Vatican. By the way, the Society of St. Pius X's pilgrimage was listed by the Vatican and then deleted, but this group is still listed as of today as an official pilgrimage group. They marched into the Vatican, really waving their flags, waving a cross that was decorated with the LGBTQ rainbow. I don't even want to show pictures because they were so ghoulish. I mean, it's almost like a science fiction film. People that, like, you can't even tell what they are. They're just these distorted amalgamations of male and female characteristics. That, like I said, it's like something out of a sci-fi novel. So they just paraded into the Vatican, celebrated themselves for this Jubilee year in the Jubilee churches, and not a single reprimand from anyone in Rome saying this is inappropriate. Yet, an Italian bishop has finally done something. In the same week when this happened, Bishop Mariano Craciata of Latina suspended ad divinis a priest of the diocese who's by the name of Don Leonardo Maria Pompei, forbidding him to celebrate any sacraments, offer mass, even wear clerical attire or identify himself as a priest. What did this priest do to deserve this? Did he march in an LGBTQ parade? Did he support abortion? No. He questioned the Second Vatican Council. In a live stream, he said that the Second Vatican Council was had some conclusions that were incompatible with Catholic tradition, and the church should go back to its ancient Roman liturgy. That crime got him suspended ad divinis. So maybe if he had, said he was going to become gay, that would have been okay. Maybe if he does that, he'll get his faculties back.
So what we've been talking about in this and all the prior episodes in terms of the state of the church today would be the final destination of the conquering march of the zeitgeist. Because if you look at the history of the age of democratic revolution, 1776, 1789, the 1848 revolutions, the Latin American revolutions, and, of course, the Soviet and Chinese revolutions. Finally, in 1960 to 62, this zeitgeist, this spirit of the modern age, this idea of the democratization of everything, the end of the order of altar and throne, makes its way into the Catholic Church at the Second Vatican Council. And Pope Paul VI says at the conclusion of the council in his final address, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's almost verbatim, this is a council that subjected itself to human judgment. He literally said that. So he's inviting the spirit of the world to enter into the church. And now what we see is the revolutionary spirit of non serviam, which began with Luther, then proceeded to the philosophical revolution, then the practice of revolution throughout the world, toppling the order of altar and throne. It's now operating in the church, and the result is utter confusion.
Yeah.
You have traditionalists, you have liberal Catholics, you have neo-Catholics who are in the middle of the road. You have all these different constituencies in the church. And I believe it was Pius XI who first observed this problem developing when he said, what is this business of applying different labels to different kinds of Catholics in the church? There's only one type of Catholic, the faithful Catholic. So this is what we see in the church today. Utter chaos. The revolution has entered the church, and now we see that revolution in its final frenetic stages, resembling something like the final stages of rabies infection. When you see people of this orientation, as they like to call it, marching into the Vatican with their various symbols, things that we can't even show on camera in this show. So, yeah, I mean, it's the abomination of desolation. What else can you call it?
But yet, who's the one group? I mean, it's kind of interesting. A lot of dictators of the 20th century said you always have to have one group that everybody can hate to focus your attention against. And who's that one group? Is like sort of middle-aged elderly priest who sort of states kind of something obvious that some of the conclusions of the Second Vatican Council seem problematic.
Pope Benedict himself was critical of the liturgical reform. He says that it created a collapse of the liturgy. He spoke of the collapse of the liturgy. He spoke of a break in the history of the liturgy whose consequences could only be tragic. And it was Pope Benedict XVI himself who implicitly commented on the disastrous liturgical reform by liberating the Latin Mass with Summorum Pontificum. There's about to be a pilgrimage next month in commemoration of July 7, 2007, when he freed the Latin Mass from its fake captivity, which was cultivated under the false impression that Paul VI had forbidden the traditional liturgy. So what we see today is something quite similar to the situation during the time of the Arian heresy, when the only thing that was rigorously punished was adherence to tradition, as St. Basil the Great observed.
Yeah, again, it seems to be the only thing that people are okay that you get in trouble for is saying. Again, what maybe Benedict XVI should be dug up and put on trial and be suspended ad divinis for having questioned the liturgical reform.
Well, of course, the saving grace is the church is a supernatural institution whose founder is God incarnate. So even though there's this state of conflict, internal dissension, internal contradiction in the church, really a disaster, there were also signs of light and growth and restoration. The traditionalist movement, as we've indicated in other episodes, is a young people's movement. The young people are going to carry forward into the next generation a Latin Mass restoration. It looks like this Pope is not going to be ideologically opposed to it. In fact, we have just learned that the Summorum Pontificum pilgrimage this coming October will return for a traditional Latin Mass in St. Peter's Basilica, from which it had been banned by the last occupant of the chair of Peter, a vicious, intolerant ideologue. We don't have that now in the chair of Peter. So let's hope and pray that this Pope at least does no harm to those who are seeking to bring about a restoration of sanity in these different oases of the traditional Latin Mass communities, as reflected in this pilgrimage, which is going to return to St. Peter's Basilica. So it's never a question of losing hope. That in the end, church will be restored. The only question is how much suffering we'll have to endure in the meantime. This is, as Bishop Schneider said, the fourth great crisis in the history of the church. But it will end sooner or later.
Well, and interesting is sort of how it ends. There's an approach that's now 5 years old. Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano put forward that more and more I'm getting convinced he was on to something, right? Instead of, we got to figure this out, analyze it, look at, he said, you know what? The only way out of this is the church just needs to forget about the Second Vatican Council.
Exactly. I've been saying that for 20 years.
Solution. It was like a brilliant, like, you know what? Anything good in there we can find anywhere else in tradition. So let's just forget about it and move on.
No, it hangs around like a mephitic fog, and no one can really tell you what it is about the Second Vatican Council that we are supposed to accept, nor can they explain what it means to deny the Second Vatican Council. What is it that we're denying?
Right.
What is it that I've told this joke before, perhaps even in this series, but remember when the Society was having negotiations with the Vatican about resolving doctrinal differences?
Yes.
And so I said, well, they should attend the first session and they should say, the Society's representatives to the Vatican's representatives, can you give us a list of the propositions of the Second Vatican Council that require an assent of faith that was not required before the Second Vatican Council? And they would return with a blank sheet of paper, and then the Society's representatives could say, okay, let's go have lunch.
Well, first of all, they wouldn't return with a blank sheet of paper because they would be lost arguing with each other over what might be included in the paper and not be able to agree.
Yeah. But none of these so-called propositions of the council that we must accept are reducible to actual statements of Catholic doctrine. We're talking about orientations, attitudes, Irenicism toward other religions, an openness to the modern world. These are all attitudinal or at most practical or pastoral accommodations that can more or less be accepted or rejected. You could live your life as a Catholic, practicing your faith exactly the same way you did before the Second Vatican Council, and no one could say that you've done anything wrong. It's as if the council never existed. And doctrinally speaking, in terms of what we must believe in order to be Catholics, the council doesn't exist. What exists is this atmosphere of the council, these emanations from the penumbras of the council. and it's all a matter of ineffable intuitions that they can never really characterize as doctrine or reduce to so many words. That's the mystery of the whole conciliar phenomenon. There's never been a council like this in 2,000 years of church history. And the sooner we forget it, I agree with you, the better off the church will be.
Yeah. Well, a tale told by an idiot full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Right.
As Shakespeare might say. Well, there you have kind of two interesting stories that we think, as we said, epitomize what we're experiencing in church and state. But as you point out, we just have to have hope because we know Our Lady said, in the end, and when the end is, we don't know. But in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. Russia will be consecrated to me and a period of peace will be given to the world. So we just don't know how long till we get to that end point where she said it'll eventually work out. And But we know we have her assurance of the word of the Mother of God that it will get there, and we will have this great triumph of the Immaculate Heart, this period of peace for the world, because she's promised it to us, and as a mother, she will deliver on that promise.
It's absolutely inevitable. Christ is the Lord of history, and his mother is the greatest of all prophets. And so we can rest assured that the Lord of history will have his designs fulfilled sooner or later. And of course, we have to remind ourselves that for each one of us, the reckoning will come, the end of our time in this world will come, and the end of our history will be before us, and our particular judgment is the thing that we have to be concerned about. Exactly. But in terms of the restoration of the church, that's inevitable. It's inevitable.
Yes. Well, there you have it. I hope all is well in your life, and God willing, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, till the next time.